Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our event on cloud logging tips and tricks to help you go from insights to action faster. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. And leading our event today is technical account manager Manish Gupta, who will be taking you through the content and answering your questions. And questions are encouraged, so please feel free to use that YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to it either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. And we did get a few pre-submitted questions, so we'll be covering those as well. Any questions that we don't get to, please drop them into the Google Cloud community, and one person from the community or the Google Cloud team will be happy to help you out, and the link to the community is in the YouTube description. All right, well, with that, thank you all for joining us, and I will hand it over to you, Manish, to take us through the content today.
Thanks, Laura. And hey, everyone on the call. First of all, our apologies. We did have to move this call by a few days, and the reason is I was out sick. I am feeling much better, so thanks for your patience. But if you hear me clearing my throat or taking a long pause, that's I'm catching up my breath. So, having said that, let's get going. Quick couple of questions to the audience. Are there anyone on the call who has just started using Google Cloud? Not Google Cloud logging, but Google Cloud. Lauren, if anyone is speaking, I am not able to hear.
Yep, Manish, everyone will be dropping questions or comments into the chat. So I would say let's just keep going, and we'll give people some time to drop their thoughts into the chat or any feedback that they might have.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll get going with the topic, and that today's topic is cloud logging tips and tricks. We'll see how best we can make use of logging, and logging is super important for obvious reasons. Logging is how we know what has happened in our system, who did what, when, and why. So also from a compliance and audit standpoint, logging is super important because you want to know who made changes and when and why. So having said that, Google excels in logging. It's the very same technology that Google uses internally that's made available as a Google Cloud Platform product or service. So with that, I am into my Google Cloud project. I'm showing you my own POC project. And from here, this is the home page. How do we get to logging is where we start. So there are a couple of ways you can navigate yourself to the logging service. One is if you simply type logging in the search bar, you get this bunch of pages, and we can choose any one of them. They all go to the same service. And this is usually what I do. The other two options are if you click on this hamburger menu, then you can keep navigating yourself way down, or you can pin to make it accessible quicker, like here. So I'll click on this logging, and it takes us to this logging. So don't pay attention to this stuff on the right side of the things. We are going to cover all of these on the left hand side. This is the entire logging operations logging suite, and these are some of the services or features that are available as part of it. And we'll go through all of them one by one, and I'll have your attention on few of them that I find to be most useful for me personally, as well as for all my customers that I'm exposed to. So the first thing that we'll start with is log storage. Logging is not free, it costs you, but it's a necessary cost, and for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. But still, it's worthwhile to know how much logs is costing. Are there any ways that we can reduce the spend, or at least know what specifically in the log storage is costing us? So, for that, log storage gives us a very good overview, not just an overview, actually a detailed breakdown. So, if you pay your attention to this upper rectangular window with four tabs, four bricks, so to speak, this tells you, the first one tells you how much of the usage that we have been having for this month, and we still have 10 days to go. Since it's my own POC, these numbers are very small, but in a real customer environment, this could go up to terabytes or multiple terabytes, even petabytes for some of our large customers. So very important to know what's going on. And this is in fact the entire month's total usage. And then you can really easily from here, you can derive how much logging is costing you, because if you take this number, multiply by the unit price, or you can click here to go into your billing to see how much it costed you. And this is saying that this is the current utilization, but this is the projected for the entire month. So all of this is very useful information just to find out what are we doing as far as logging is concerned, how much are we logging. But that brings another very interesting question that, okay, let's say this number is 25 or 200 or 2 terabytes. It still doesn't tell me which service is logging and how much. In order for us to understand where is this 2 terabyte logging coming from or 25 gigabyte logging coming from, we need a breakdown of the logs ingestion by the product, by the service. So that is where this C ingestion analysis comes in handy. I'm going to click in here, and it takes us to metrics or monitoring, metrics explorer. Now, this is the key information that we need to understand what is the breakdown of the logging by each product, by each service, right? So let me, right now it is showing me last 1 month, which actually encompasses last 2 months, bit of June, bit of July. That's why you see this a big drop, because this is the end of the month. So let me sort this output and just say, let's say last 20 days or something like that. So let's say last 20 days, 20D. So now this is only talking about July, or I can look at any custom time frame that I'm interested in, let's say last 1 day or last 1 hour or a specific time period. So from here, if you hover your mouse over to these graphs or line charts, you very clearly you can see what's going on. Like if I hover my mouse over, this tells me that my biggest consumption is coming from a K8s container, and K8s node is my second biggest consumer. So if your logging cost is going unnecessarily high, or maybe it is configured correctly, but you just are curious to understand who is driving my logging cost, that's the way that you can very easily, very quickly get down to the meat. Okay, K8s is the one that is contributing. Now, it brings down the next obvious question that, okay, now I understand it's related to GKE. It still doesn't tell me which specific container or which specific node should I ponder over. In my given project, I may have more than one cluster. In a given cluster, I may have more than one pods. And for all practical purposes, you will have hundreds of pods. And each of those pods may have multiple containers. So from this output, how do I know which specific container should I be looking at, right? So hold on to your thought there. We will get back to that in just a few minutes. So this screen actually tells you the logging breakdown by the product or service. And I hope that this opens a new avenue for you. So let's go back to where we started and cover the rest of it. This portion, super important. This lower window is super important for us to know and look at. So let's spend a little bit of time here, and then we go back to the previous question that we left unanswered. That is, which specific container or node should I look at? So here we see 2 log buckets that are created by default out of the box, and they are named. So one is called _default, one is called _required. And as the name suggests, this _required is required, and you cannot make any changes to it. And it is unbilled. Basically, you don't pay for it. And the default retention is 400 days. And all it stores is the audit related information. audit related information. What do we mean by that? Who made what change and when? Because that's super critical to know when it comes to a security incident or when it comes to an internal or external audit. So what goes in the audit bucket? So if you click on those three vertical dots, these three vertical dots on the far right, and you can see this bucket is locked. You cannot make any changes to it. So if you click on these three dots, you can see view bucket details. And if you view the bucket details, okay, yeah, that's good. Maybe edit. I'm waiting for it to populate. Wow, something is going on. Let me take a look. Let me go back, retry. Okay, this works. Okay, sorry, my bad. Okay, let me get back to this audit thing in just a second. So let's look at the other bucket now. This you do pay for it, and by default it is only 30 days. And I would strongly recommend for production workloads or for financial workloads or for customers in healthcare industry to look at this retention period, because you do lose the logs after 30 days. And as you can see, it is unlocked. You can make changes to it. You can increase or decrease the retention period. You can control what is going in this log bucket, and I'll show you in just a second. So other than these two log buckets, you can create more log buckets to route your logs as per your requirement. What do I mean by that? Let's get to that. So the next thing that we are going to look at is log router. Okay, this is what I wanted to show. So in the log router, we have the same two buckets, and these are the out of the box buckets. And now let's look at the required one, that what is going in my required bucket, what is going in my default bucket. And like I said, you can create more log buckets, you can create more syncs, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So if we now look at what is happening in this required, and remember this required is nothing but the audit bucket. So if we click on these three dots and say view sync details, now look, pay close attention to this. See, there is something known as inclusion filter, something known as exclusion filter. And as the name suggests, inclusion filter means what is included. Exclusion filter means what is excluded. And it's saying exclude nothing. And it's saying include what? Include this. And if you pay close attention, you will see that it is fetching anything that is audit. So where it says log ID equal to audit activity here, or let's keep rolling, external audit activity, or system event related to audit, external audit system event. So basically the TLDR is anything that is related to audit goes into this bucket. This is access transparency. Yeah. So basically anything that is related to audit goes into this bucket, and that's why this bucket is locked. You cannot make changes, because what's the point of auditing information if you can change what is being audited? So, and then let's move it to default bucket, what's getting logged into this bucket. So if you click on view sync details, now remember in case of exclusion filter for the audit bucket, it was saying exclusion filter none, which is basically exclude nothing. And inclusion filter said include everything audit. Now, this is just the negation of audit. It is saying include what? Anything that is not audit. So you'll see this keyword not everywhere, and it's negating anything that is audit, because audit we are already rerouting to the audit bucket. Not, and all these nots are basically from the audit buckets. Yep. And as you can see, the edit button is enabled here, so you can make edits. You can change the retention, you can change the inclusion or exclusion filter as well. But if I go to the required bucket, you can't, there is no edit, it's grayed out. Right. All right. So, and like I said, you can create more syncs. So let's try and show you what are the different options. So if you click on create sync, you have to give a name. Let's give some send logs to hell. I don't know why, but let's send them to hell. So next, these are the different options that you have. You can create another logging bucket, like I alluded to earlier. You can even send your log to BigQuery dataset. You can push them to a cloud storage bucket. You can send them to a PubSub, aka messaging. You can send them to Splunk, or you can centralize all your logs into one dedicated project that you create, or you might have created only for logs. So these are the multiple options, and this PubSub opens a whole bunch of other options, in the sense that if you're sending your logs to PubSub, any external service that can connect to messaging, you can ingest your logs from here to that external service via PubSub. So I'm not going to create any of them, but I just wanted to show you the options. And then once you choose a service, this is where you have your inclusion or your exclusion filter here to decide, okay, you want to send your logs here, but what kind of logs, that you choose here. What do you not want to include, you send here, and then you create a sync. And once the sync is active, it will pick up those log records that meet the criteria and start sending to the new sync that you created. Similarly, if you feel that you want to play around with this default bucket, you do have the edit access. I suggest if you start playing or tinkering with the default bucket, do that in your sandbox or playground environment, not in production. But you can certainly change these settings like retentions, or what do you want to include in the default, or if you want to put some exclusion criteria, you can. All right, so the next thing that we are going to look at is Logs Explorer. Certainly the most interesting out of all the options in terms of when you're actually trying to find some stuff. So this is Logs Explorer is what you get at. And Google, I can't stress it enough that Google excels at logging. And we are going to cover some tips and tricks that are going to make your life easier. I forgot to touch upon that log analytics. So I'll go back to log storage one more time. Okay, maybe not here in log router. No, right here, log analytics. So this log analytics, if you basically do this check mark, then in Logs Explorer, you have to rely on a certain way of accessing logs. But if you're really good at SQL statements, and in fact, you are a database expert, and you prefer a SQL way of finding stuff rather than a JSON way of finding it, then log analytics is your best friend. Here you find information via SQL. This is log analytics, this is Logs Explorer. And if you don't know how to get started, so you can click on SQL reference, and it will show you some sample queries which are very useful from the word get go, and you're on your way finding the information. So with that, let's go back to the Logs Explorer. So it's daunting to start. It has lots of toggles, but my goal will be to make it, or my goal will be to dissect it one at a time so that we have a better time understanding all the different options that are out here. So the first thing that you note is it has this time window. So whatever search criteria I enter, it'll be last 20 days. So let me make sure that I have it last 2 days. It may be different for your use case. You may have to go back like 1 day, 1 month. Remember, 30 days is what you have the default retention, but for auditing you have 400 days. So if you go back to, let's say I say 90 days, 90D, right? So, and if I am looking for information such as who logged into my VM, I might be successful because I have 400 days worth of log, but I'm looking for something that's not audit related. Then even if I say 90 days, it'll only go up to 30 days only because that's my retention. So I'll go back to my 2 days. So that's the time window. And it doesn't have to be in days. You can say, I know some problem happened in the, let's say, past 15 minutes. You can drill down to past 15 minutes. Or you can say that I know some problem happened on Sunday between 9 and 9:05, or that 5 minute window. You can do the custom time frame as well. For example, if you know the start and end times, you can be very precise. You can go in 1 minute, 5 minute, all those windows, and you can pick your custom time. So this is super useful because the longer your window, if your problem is very pointed, it makes sense to have the focused time window because log entries generally go in millions and billions, so it's tough to find. But if you have a very pointed window of a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, then the narrower you go, the easier it gets to find what you're looking to find. So now I'll go back to our previous query. Remember that in log storage, we figured out that it's the Kubernetes node and the container that's responsible for the most amount of logging. And that logging is for last 20 days, the 25 gig, if you remember. Let's try to answer that question. So all I'm saying right now is last 20 days, and I'm waiting for the data to populate here. And from the metrics explorer, we know that it's a Kubernetes container. So the first thing that we can do is on this side of the house, we know it's a container. So let's click on container. So by clicking on the container, that gets into this filter window. So right now, before this, this was scoping everything. Everything was getting calculated here. Right now, we are only looking at the K8 as container logs. And the question that we are trying to answer is, out of all the hundreds of or thousands of container that I'm running in my environment, which specific container or which specific set of containers are logging the most information? So if you look at this window, there are multiple colors. Each color represents a severity of error. Like this blue thing is like info, and you can see the color and the message here. The orange is warning and the red is error. But again, we are trying to answer which container is logging the most, right? So we are only looking at the container logs. If you keep going down in this, it'll tell you a lot more information. So here, you know that I have 4 GKE clusters running in my project. And those 4 clusters basically correspond to these many namespaces, these many pods, and these are all the containers that are running in my environment. And there's this show more to more. I think it's only getting a top 10 or top something like that. So from this window alone, I know that these are my top 2 containers that are logging the most information. So we went at a high level, we wanted to know out of my 25 gigabyte of log usage, which product or service is responsible, We said it's the K8s container from the metrics. Then the next question is, out of all the containers that I might be running in an environment, how do I know which specific container to look at as far as the amount of logging is concerned? So that is, this window tells us, okay, this is the container that's logging the most amount of information. Good or bad is not the question. The question is the volume. So now we know this is the container that we should be looking at if we want to reduce the logging usage. So let's click on this name. So I'm waiting for the information to be populated right now. If you see here, there's no color. So I'm waiting for that data to populate. So now we are only looking at information related to this container. And I'm taking a pause just to make sure that we have all the information here. Okay, we do. So what is the breakdown of this? It says that total there are about 10 million entries. And if you notice, all of it is info. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to click on info. Let me delete that and wait for it again. Almost there. Yeah, all right. All of it is info. There are no errors, there is no warning, there is no nothing. It's just spitting out information and consuming my logging. If you pay close attention, you will see that this specific container is in 3 locations, 4 cluster, which means that I have multi-cluster. I have a application running in multiple clusters, or a multi-cluster application in the same project. That's what's happening, right? So now, depending on if this is your playground and you don't care about info type of messages because it's costing you, you can set that as an exclude filter in your default bucket for this very specific resource. How do I do that? So let's say I click on info. So using the combination of these 3 items, I can go back. I can go back to, let me try to go back to the router, and let's say edit here. So in the exclude filter, I can basically have the I can build the exclusion filter here, but we already built it. And I can add the exclusion, which says, like, if you happen to see this combination, sorry, if you happen to see this combination, then do not log that. And again, I would like to caution you here that do not do this for production. You do want to log everything for production, but if it's just a sand ground, just a playground, you're just trying out a few things, this is one option. All right. So with that, let me go back to the useful stuff in Logging Explorer. So now let's say that we're not looking at who's logging how much. We are trying to find specific answers, and the specific question might be, who logged into my VM, right? Let's say I have a whole bunch of VMs, and I'm interested in finding out who logged into a specific VM, let's say in last 2 days or something like that. So if someone could confirm, um, okay, let's see. So we'll follow the same route. We know we are talking about a VM. So let's go down to a VM. This is VM. And okay, I'm waiting for it to happen. Did I click or did I not click? VM. All right. So again, we are trying to answer the question, who logged into my VM? So we selected GCE instance as the service or the resource, and then we'll put more filters to answer this specific question very, very easily, right? These are all the instance IDs or instances VMs in my project. Let's pick one of them. Let's pick this guy. This is one VM that I'm interested in, let's say. that who logged into this VM. So now instead of parsing through a whole bunch of logs, I'm parsing a very specific log, which is one VM instance. And the question that I'm trying to answer is who logged in. So the moment I selected these two, I'm down to only two log entries. This is just because it's my own POC environment. And your question might be more specific. Who logged into my VM between 5 and 6 p.m. or between 9 and 10 a.m.? And you can definitely have that time filter up here. But this query tells you, or this way of filtering makes your life much more easier when you're trying to find out that very, very specific information as to who did what and why and when. So if you expand any of the entries, you'll see multiple toggles here. If you click on this expand nested fields, this is very, very useful. So if you look at this entry in detail, let's go make this go up. And there are a whole bunch of information here, right? Whole bunch of information. The beauty of this is, let's say that you want to filter it even more for whatever reason. You want to filter it even more. You don't want to. Okay, here is what I will do. Let's say you want to filter in addition to what you have filtered already. You want to filter on a given project ID, instance ID, zone, or whatever the case might be. And let's see if there are more things in there. Yeah, that's it. So let's say you want to filter on this whole thing. Click on this and say show matching entries. Or let's say you want to filter everything but don't want to see this again, so you can say hide matching entry. So I'll click on show matching entry. In this case, the result won't change, but this gives you an additional thing to filter. And the more you filter, the quicker you get to your answer. So that's one of the things that I wanted to show. You're not restricted to remembering this. You can start with very basic, which is instance. And again, we didn't remember this syntax. We got this syntax from here. Once you are at the instance level or any service level, any resource type level, you see the basic result set like we saw here. Expand the entry, any of the entries, any of the expenditure, any of the entries, and then wait for the right attribute here. Wait for the right attribute. Once you see that attribute, click on it. For example, let's say this one, and then say show matching entry. You'll immediately filter. You don't need to remember any of it. It's very intuitive. So that is your way of navigating very, very quickly. The other very, very useful thing is this library. These are pre-built queries. And guys, this is something that I learned myself for this demo because this is so new. So these are all pre-built stuff, very useful. Let's say there are 94 pre-built queries. Let's say, I don't know, maybe you want to find something in Kubernetes, maybe Compute Engine, maybe whatever, any of these services. So let's say IAM. Very quickly, these are pre-built. Very quickly, just click on one of these buttons and it will show you. You don't need to remember any of it. Let's say this set service account creation logs. Let's say run. So see, it automatically populated this. So this is saying in last 20 days, it will find the information if anybody created a service account or what service accounts were created. So let's see if it finds anything. I haven't tried this before. So it found nothing. So no account has been created in 20 days. And because this is an audit type of information, I'll say 200 days. Let's see if we get back anything. If you see here, it is going back in time. So I'm then just waiting for something to happen. I don't know if it'll find anything in 200 days, but let's see. Okay, looks like it is able to find something. All right, it found two entries. This is back in May, and it's It's still going, but it is able to find few entries already. And again, depending on what you're trying to find, you can expand that entry and then look at and filter down even more. So the point is that in this library, there are a lot of pre-built queries that are ready to go and give you a very good starting point, and then you can fine tune for your own custom purpose. So with that, we've covered this analytics, we have covered router storage. We have not looked at metrics yet. So metrics, I think there is a one of the pre-submitted questions. So let's look at the metric. For that, let's go to Logs Explorer, the regular way of finding stuff. And I'll expand one of the entries and just grab something randomly to explain the point of the log metric. I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe this guy. Show me anything related to this. All right. So all I'm saying is in last 200 days, give me everything on this guy. And let's say, I mean, I just picked this randomly, but you may have a genuine case that you're looking at, okay, how many times somebody logged into my VM, or what's my latency of you. Let's say you have a web application and you want to ensure that 99% of the requests are under a given latency, right? So there might be any useful use case. I just picked randomly to show how do you create a logging metric. So with this information, if you see this middle section, there is this create metric, create alert type thing. You can, once you have your filter criteria set, you can click on just this button to create a metric, and you get all of this information which will help you to create a log metric. What is a metric? It's basically a quantifiable attribute, like I just mentioned. How many times did you log in? What is my CPU utilization? What is my memory utilization? What is my average latency? Or what else? How many number of errors, or which type of errors am I getting? Any of those are metrics, and you use those metrics basically to create alerts, and you use those alerts in order to remain under your SLOs, defined SLOs that you have for a given service. And you have two types of metrics. One is called counter. Counter, as the name suggests, counts the number of things. And the other one is distribution, which is basically a statistical distribution, or another way of saying what is my average utilization for a given machine, let's say over a running window of 1 hour, or running window of 2 hours or 3 hours, and so on. So you can create any of these metrics like this, the way I'm showing. And of course, it is supported using Terraform as well. I think that was one of the questions that I picked up. So, okay, with that, we have looked at this analytics, metrics. Let's look at the dashboard. So this is just a broad overview of everything that is happening in all of the product and services that have the logging enabled. All right. So this is at a very broad level that you see what is happening to all the services that have the logging enabled, for you to quickly see what's going on. You can create dashboards out of it. It already is a dashboard, but you can customize the way you want, basically a quick glance of information out of the box. Okay, let's do a quick time check. Lauren, are we still on time?
We are, and we've received a few questions. So depending on what else you would love to show, I think it would be good to hop over to some questions.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. And thank you all for those. Please keep them coming. So we'll start with some of those that we did receive that were pre-submitted, and then we'll hop over and mix in some of those from the chat. So thank you for those. Keep them coming. All right. Our first question is how to get Google IAM recommendations into the logging platform.
Okay, how to get Google IAM recommendations into the logging platform. Let me go back to my window. I did look at this question yesterday, and unfortunately, I did not save the URL, but I am hoping very quickly to find that information. There is, yes, there is this. Oh, okay, yes. So basically, what happens is when you see the IAM recommendations on the IAM page, let's say you have given a role of editor to a given user or a set of users or a service account, the IAM recommender will tell you that, hey, this role is overly permissive based on the policy intelligence data, and that data is basically your access usage within the last 90 days. The role editor has over close to 5,000 privileges, and the policy intelligence basically checks that in the last 90 days, how many of those 5,000 permissions have you actually used, you as in the end user or the service account in this case. And based on that, it'll suggest that, hey, these are the recommendations, as in these are the privileges that you really need, and not the entire set of 5,000 permissions that you're given with the role editor. Now if you accept that recommendation or you discard that recommendation, it does get logged into logging. So it only gets logged into logging if you accept or reject, basically, if you take an action on the recommendation. And I thought I had that open. Yeah. Lauren, is my screen this one visible where it says this recommender factions?
Yep.
Okay, so this is, if you have taken action on a recommendation, it does get logged, and you can see the log entry here because I saw this pre-submitted question, and I'm indeed taken action on one of the recommendation just to showcase. So this is the log that you'll go look at, and this is the complete path. So it will be projects, your project name, logs, and the recommender API basically. And again, you will only see this if there is an action that has been taken on the recommendation. Okay, let's take the next one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, here we have a question from David. Is there a cost associated with querying, or is it just storage that's billed?
No, the cost is only with the storage.
All right.
And we went over on a good detail how to find how much logging is costing you, and that is attributed to which product or service. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, and then we have a follow-up from David. I tried filtering using the analyze storage feature from earlier. Is there any way to filter by something as granular as a JSON message?
I did not understand the question. So if you could explain a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, David, if you have any additional clarification or any additional context that you can provide, that'd be awesome. And then we can come back to it. If not, also feel free to utilize the community if we're not able to get to it today. But I'd love to hear if you have any additional context for that one. All right. So one here we have is, how do I filter for BigQuery jobs, which shows the bytes billed and bytes processed?
Yep, great question. This is actually in the BigQuery information schema. Uh, BigQuery information schema answers exactly what you're asking, and let me see if I can quickly find that for you. Yeah, so and pick any of these pre-built ones, jobs by project, user, folder, or organization. Let me click by project. Any of these will have that information that you're asking, and I can share this link. There are pre-built queries as well here. Let me share this link. How do I share this link, Lauren?
Yep, I think I actually have it. So I'll drop it right
Okay.
into the chat for everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So do check that out here. Thanks, Manish. Okay. Thanks for your questions. So we'll get one more that came in from the pre-submitted is, can we create alerts from logs with Terraform?
Yep, you sure can. It's very much supported. We use it extensively internally at Google. And again, you can create the alerts as long as the metric exists. So there is this little bit of chicken and egg. You need to create a alert channel first. Once the channel is created, you need to have a metric, of course. A metric could be a user defined or system defined, could be a counter, could be a distribution metric. But once you do have a metric, yes, you can use Terraform to create an alert on top of it. In fact, you can use Terraform to create the channel, create the metric, and create an alert. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Our next question is, how do you recommend creating a monitoring dashboard with all the services that have data access logging enabled in Audit Logs?
How do you recommend creating a monitoring dashboard with all these services? Want to understand what's the intent here. Is the intent okay? I'm going to make certain assumptions and then answer based on that. If the intent is to prevent data exfiltration, then monitoring won't help. You need a way to prevent that, and the way to prevent that is VPC-SC. It's VPC service control parameter. Basically, you create a boundary around your VPC so that the data cannot be sent out. I'm not sure why would you want to monitor and not protect. So that's the confusion that I have. Like, what do we mean by a monitoring dashboard with all these services that have data access log enabled? But putting on a different lens, if you all you want to do is monitor, and you do have data access logging enabled in auditing, you can use the same metrics or the alert that someone just posted the question and alert off of that. That if you do see somebody accessing certain data that they shouldn't, again, I'll go back to the same point that you should protect first before you start monitoring. If you don't have a protection, but you still want to monitor, then alert is the way to go.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, and for the person who asked this question, if you do have any additional context, we'd love to hear from you on that as well. But thank you, Manish, for that answer. Okay, we have an additional one here around security and compliance. How can I prevent users from seeing specific log names because it appears in the scope project in Logs Explorer?
Very good question. There is a concept known as log views. Let me look it up really, really quickly. This is what you will use to control who gets to see what, and you can very granularly control access to the logs. And the question makes sense because even if you give the log viewer access, logs do have sensitive information, and you do want to protect who can see what, and this log views allows you to do that. So Lauren, if you could share this link.
Yep, will do.
So what you will do is you will create these log views and define what goes. Basically, it's like a SQL view. You want to protect the access to the underlying tables, and then you create a log view, or a SQL view, which solves the business purpose. It lets them see what you want them to see without seeing the underlying data. The very same concept here is log view, that you create this log view for the end users, and then you give them the access to the log view, not the underlying logging buckets.
Great. And that link is available in the chat. Awesome. Okay. See, we have one more question here. Thank you again for all of your questions. Are there any security reports that can be generated from audit logs by using BigQuery as a sink?
By using BigQuery as a sink. Security reports that can be generated from audit logs. Sure. I mean, it sounds like you are on the right path. The Chronicle and Mandiant is basically a out of the box solution, but it's a paid solution. But if you are creative enough and courageous enough to do on your own, yes, you can send it to BigQuery, all the access data or the audit data, and then you can write a SQL statement on top of that BigQuery data to get you what you want. Yes, it can be done.
Awesome. Okay, well, that covers the questions that we've received so far. So last call if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, we will get towards the final resources and what's next. So just a few things before we close out today. We have mentioned it, but if you are not part of the community, we would love to have you join. And that is where you can ask questions, engage in forums, two-way conversations with your peers and with Googlers. And that link is at the top here on this slide, as well as in the YouTube description. So if there are any questions we weren't able to get to today, that's where you'll want to go. We also would love to hear from you if you have any feedback on this session. So I'll drop it into the link into the chat as well. But this is just a quick feedback form. It should take you 30 seconds to a minute. Love to hear from you what you thought about this session, if you have topics or ideas for future sessions as well. And speaking of future sessions, we have a few coming up next week and before next, which is at the end of August. So we'll be taking a break from our community events in August for next. But until then, we have a few final events in July, including a follow-up session with Manish on securing your Google Compute Engine resources on the 25th. So we'd love to see you there for that one, as well as a couple of other sessions that you can check out on that third link. Okay, with that, that's all we have. Manish, do you have any final thoughts or recommendations for folks? Just wanted to say thank you so much for your time and walking us through all of these tips and tricks. I know I learned more than a few things that are helpful. So thank you so much. Any final thoughts or recommendations before we close out today?
Just want to thank everyone for their patience and for spending the time with us. And yeah, just enjoy the Google Cloud platform. It's a wonderful platform. And look forward to seeing you in many more future sessions.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you next time. All right.